if you haven't attended a Midway Living History program for the library before, it's a community conversation. I always invite people who have some knowledge on the subject and can help lead the conversation, but basically you're here to listen and to contribute what you have to say, and it always turns out to be a really nice conversation. We've gone for an hour and a half before, so I'm glad to have you here. And it's one thing I was just telling somebody in talking with a lot of you to ask if you come here today and learning more about this park and the history behind it. It was fascinating to me, and there's so many people and so many different stages that this park went through. And something that I thought about was how many doers there are in this community, how many people they see something that they want done and they do it. There's active people here. And so it took a group of active people to take a vision of having a park here, which probably didn't look much like a park at one time. And I'm sure that was hard to do. And then the man for whom the park was named was a doer in our community, somebody that was very active, Mr. Bradley. And then we have a really dedicated group of people that work constantly on this park now to make sure that it's here for the community to enjoy. So I really appreciate that about Midway, and I think it's a really good part of our city. We have Molly Bradley here today. I was so happy that she could come and tell us a little bit more. I don't know much about Walter Bradley, and I would love to know more. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her speak for a little bit, and then again we'll just continue on with the conversation. Just jump in, of course, be respectful and listen to what everybody has to say, and we'll just keep going. Grayson's going to help me. Grace.
I want to thank everybody, and hello, I'm Molly Bradley. I'm Walter Bradley's wife. I brought a picture of Walter. I am so thankful to Stacy for inviting me here, and my chauffeur, French, for bringing me here, because my son, he works at Toyota, and he had to work tonight. So I'm just so pleased to be here and to meet everyone. And I'm just so thankful it's not raining. I was asked to come to say a little bit about Walter. How many of you knew Walter? Quite a few, because he got around quite a lot. I want to thank Honorable Mayor Vandergrift. I'm just learning how to pronounce your name. For all that you have done, and to the leader of whoever keeps the park wonderfully clean and pretty, I want to thank you and your family and everybody else. I just appreciate that so very, very much, because it's amazing how many people out there have mentioned about the park, and how many of them see it on the internet. I'm not an internet person, but they tell me about it, and I said, well, we have some other people that take care of the park, and it is a beautiful place. I want to talk to you today about 2004, October 2004. I received a call from Councilman Tom Bozart, representing the Honorable Mayor Mickey Moore and the City Council. And he asked me permission to name the city park after Walter. I had just come in from work and got this phone call. I said, oh, I was stunned. I was stunned because this was a great honor. And for them to think that much for Walter made me feel so very, very good. Yes. So on May 13, 2005, some were present, a dedicatorial service was held in City Hall, naming the park Walter T. Bradley Jr. Memorial Park. The Honorable Governor Puritan Jones was the guest speaker, and it was a wonderful service. And the Bradley family will always be grateful to the city of Midway. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Walter Green. This is sort of just a synopsis of his life because he had a busy life. We were everywhere. We loved to travel and we just kept busy. And we loved that. But I want to tell you that Walter was born in Midway, October the 2nd, 1925, to Walter Sr. and Sarah Pratt Bradley. He was the eldest of 5 children. He received his education in Midway Elementary School and graduated from Simmons High School, Sprayberry Electronic Academy, and Fort Belvoir School of Drafting in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. He was a veteran of World War II and honorably discharged in 1950. He was employed by the Bluegrass Army Depot and retired in 1977 after 27 years of service as an electronic engineer inspector. Shortly after retiring, he was elected the first African American to serve on the Midway City Council and served for 24 years. During his tenure, he served as chairman of several committees. These committees were successful in improving the streets, sanitary collection, fire department, and solving other outstanding problems in the city. He served as a precinct officer in the Midway voting precinct for many years. In 1990, he was elected president of the Midway Lions Club and was commissioned a Kentucky colonel by the Honorable Governor Paul Patton. In 2001, a street in the new development was named in his honor. He was a member of Pilgrim Baptist Church for 50 years and served as a trustee. Later, united with Emmanuel Baptist Church Lexington and served in many capacities, including a deacon for 15 years. Among his hobbies were reading. He learned to read when he was 5 years old and never stopped until he passed away. He loved it. He loved music. He was a great bass singer and he had sung a lot of times with the Lexington Singers and the choir at Emmanuel Baptist Church and other singers. He loved to travel. We have traveled 32 states, including the Bahamas and Canada. Boy, did we love it. We didn't have much money, but we traveled. And he was a writer. He loved to write. He was a contributing ed writer during Black History Month for the Woodford Sun for 15 years. And he was owner and operator of the first laundrette in Midway, and this was in 1959 to 1969. In 1981, he received an honorary third degree in Prince Hall Masonry in Jackson, Mississippi. He was a recipient of many such certificates and awards. And in 2017, an award from the Woodford County High School Hall of Fame was given posthumously for public service. We were married for 52 years and the parents of 2 children, Walter III, Mary Gwen, and Harry Stephen. We have 2 grandsons, Walter IV and Tara, and we have 4 great-grands that he did not see. We'd love to have them because they are just wonderful. On January the 5th, 2004, he passed away in his beloved city, Midway. Everywhere he would go, he would tell people, they would ask, "Where are you from?" He said, "I am from Midway, Kentucky." They said, "Well, where is this?" He said, "It's between Lexington and Frankfort in Kentucky, and that is where I am from." And he was so proud of Midway. He just loved Midway. to sum up his life's work, I saw this poem and I thought it was it just spoke of him. And it reads, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he is traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. And his living wasn't in vain. Thank you. This is an article that was in the Woodford Sun in 1994 of Walter when he was a councilman. And so somebody may want to read this. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Ms. Bradley, thank you so much. That was a wonderful tribute to a wonderful man. I was unfortunate to never have met Walter, but know so much about him through many people's stories, including Ms. Bradley's. So there are many people here tonight who can give more information about how the land became the park, and I'm eager to hear from all of those people. But just really quickly to kind of bring everybody up to speed on how we got to this kind of current transformation in the park is back in 2015, Midway Renaissance asked me if I would appoint a committee. We decided it would be a Citizens Advisory Committee to start studying how to better improve Walter Bradley Park. Over the years, there have been many, many people who have taken it up, had helped groom the trails, and have taken care of it. But volunteers, as you all know, get tired and they turn over, and there's new people who have to come up and step up. And there had been an absence of that over the years before 2015. Really, there just hadn't been anybody quite doing that. So it was starting to come under disrepair. Sections of it were completely overgrown with invasive species. And so it was something I had already been thinking about, but the credit goes to Midway Renaissance and the Green Space Committee for pushing this idea forward, because they were the ones that really gave it legs. So the first person we appointed was John Holloway, because John had already been working in the park. Actually, we had a big rainstorm in March of 2015, if you recall. Bad rain. Almost as bad as we had for the last 6 months of rain we got. But it was a big, quick one, and the flooding was all over town, and it actually knocked down the front of the dog park. And John Holloway asked me if I minded if he fixed it. And I was like, of course not. Let's do it. So he did. And after that, he just started on his own time, started doing things in the park here and there. Well, we formed the CAC, had about 7 members on it, and they just hit the ground running immediately. They started looking at new ideas. They even, I think, brought in some people from the maybe University of Kentucky, I believe, came in and kind of gave some ideas. That was actually part of a project of maybe the MBA students, or maybe, I forget, no, they weren't MBA students. That's right. And they kind of just gave them out some ideas, and so this project started. All along, they're beginning to plant trees, they're grooming the trails, so they're already starting to take care of it, but they're also planning for the future. And some of them that are here tonight, and quite a few of the board members are here, they can fill in the gaps I'm missing, but they began to see that for perpetuity, we didn't need a committee, we needed a board. And a few years before, Woodford County Parks removed Midway from the County Parks Board. So we were kind of stranded. We didn't even have our own Parks Board anymore. We weren't part of the counties. So we started our own at the urging of the CAC. Now, before that, the CAC not only did all the things I just mentioned, including creating new trails, they, through the leadership of John Holloway, built the bridge that now spans the East Branch with the help of Gina Morris and other members of that CAC. We then had that bridge was built before the end of 2015. It's remarkably fast how quick this all started. It was amazing. And it gained so much momentum, the CAC said we should create a board. And we did so by ordinance. So now there's a parks board that runs and is in control of the park, and they ask the city council for appropriations each year, and they spend it according to what their board agrees. Cecilia Goss is here. She's the chair of the Parks Board. John Holloway, of course, is the Parks manager. Patty Holloway is not on the board, but she's like always working with John on this stuff, so she's like an honorary ex officio member. And then Gina Morris is here as well on the Parks Board. Did I miss anybody else that's here from the Parks Board? Oh, Sarah Hicks is our council member representative. So the way the board works is there's also a member of the city council that's on the Parks Board, and Sarah Hicks represents the city council on the Parks Board. So that's sort of how we got here today. Their terms are 5-year terms, I believe. They were staggered at first. They didn't all go off at the same time, but they're all serving essentially 5-year terms. And this will continue to allow the board to exist and allow the park to be kept up in perpetuity. And it's amazing to me, when you look back just 4.5 years ago, the difference out here than what it was. You could not walk to the Grapp Street entrance. Where the bridge is now, you couldn't walk back there. It was completely overgrown. They reclaimed it, took back the invasives, so you could actually walk in there, created the trails that are in there now. All of this was just basically just grass over here. And it was more common in 2015 to see nobody out here than it was to see 2 or 3 people. And now, especially on nice days and the warm weather, it's amazing the amount of families, kids you see coming through here. They brought it all back to life. So they did a wonderful job. So that's how we are here. But let's just kick off the conversation. Anybody that wants to talk about the park, anything you want to say, it's fine. There's no agenda. But maybe if somebody wants to talk about, somebody with knowledge, maybe Carl or Hank, somebody who knows, I'll put them on the spot, but somebody who has some more history about how the park came to be. This could be the pins. Okay, Leslie, go ahead.
Okay, you want us to talk first?
Well, yeah, let me first,
Okay,
because
okay.
I think maybe, I live on Martin Street. My backyard goes into the park, and what do you do with the trail? I hewed a trail, I blazed a trail, that's what I did, from my backyard out to Gratz, and then backtracked over what is now the trail. It's higher, it's up an embankment, sort of, you know. In my mind's eye, it was a tall, steep embankment that time, but it doesn't seem that way now. And we had a green space meeting at my house, and I took them out to show them. And Phil is not here tonight, I'm sorry to say, but he was particularly struck by the potential that would hold. And so it's much tamer now, and gets lots of, it thrills me to see kids walk. You know, I can sit on my back porch and watch people make the circle, and it's just really wonderful.
I want to go back to the 1950s. No, really, I came in 1985. But when we came here, there was still a house here. It was the Lloyds, and Hank, you fill me in, who's up? Lloyd Jones lived up. His grandmother grew up here. It was just still way back here. There was no school here. There was no library. And we would walk down here behind and just look at this big hill. It was beautiful. But there was a little division in the community on when this property was sold and how we were going to develop. North Ridge wasn't there. There were a group of people that decided they wanted to develop all of this. It was real controversial because how do we want to grow? So there was a group called MAPS that formed, and it was actually made in 1991. You were the signer. I have the bylaws. I have the Constitution, the mission. One was to make a library. One thing, I mean, they did all of these little projects, which one was to decide how can we get a park up here and how can we get Northside School, these kind of things. And so with this disagreement, there were several lawsuits in deciding how are we going to settle this. Well, in order to make everybody happy, the developers decided to donate all of this property so they could develop over here. Am I saying it right, Hank? Similar. On North Ridge.
You're good.
Yes.
Eddie may weigh in.
Okay, well, anyway, you signed the contract, so I know that. But I got a picture of the Lloyd's home here that I can pass
If
around.
I could, there were
Yes,
actually,
you were.
there were actually 2 parcels of land.
Yes, 2 parcels of
Okay,
land,
and
please.
the park and the school site and the library
Right.
was 1 parcel, and the developers group bought that to develop.
To develop.
And you could see the hillside, everything else, you know, not a lot of the land was really good to be developed. And then the college actually had a deal with an older gentleman, an annuity, I guess, where they paid him so much and for the rest of his life. And when he died, I think they got the land where North Ridge is. And they didn't really have any use for that land. They already had all the land over here for the horses. So they sold that to the developers.
Gotcha.
And all of this happened at the very same time that we wanted to keep the elementary school here. Because the school
Where the
board
apartments are now.
wanted to build a new elementary school on the edge of Marywood subdivision. And all the Midway kids would have gone there. And so the developers then donated this parcel of land that makes up the school and the park, and the library, and the trails. And then they developed Northridge and Northridge Estates.
Right.
And you're right, it was extremely controversial.
It was very-
But we got through it, actually.
Right, and we got a library, we got a branch of the Woodford Library here. The old one used to be in the Presbyterian Church.
Actually, yeah, that was a
started
whole
that
nother
too.
story.
Yes.
The library
Please.
tax was developed to, and they promised us the branch. Well, years and years ago, Brenda and I moved here in 1975, and that's when they were signing the petition, and we signed it. And the promise was, is Midway would get a library.
Get a library.
And they never followed through until really Karen Kaskavich and the board finally came through and built a beautiful library we have now. So we actually started the Midway Free Public Library that was not a part of the Woodford County Library.
It's all just Midway.
It was
Run by
first at the
Midway
Presbyterian
volunteers.
Church, and then it was out at the little house of the school,
Right.
and then they came through and we have one. But it was extremely controversial, and we had it as a park, but, yeah, I can't tell you enough how appropriate it is that it's named after Walter.
Exactly. He was on the city council.
He was on the city council,
Yes.
and
He had a big voice.
everybody very much respected his opinions on.
Part of
all
the
the
agreement
controversy.
also was off of Leestown Road to keep that farmland, right?
Yeah, oh
It was
yeah.
up to-
It was a big farm,
It was a
and
big farm, and
120
it's
acres was preserved, I think in is it 120 or 90?
Well, what is now the Junior Phillips area is preserved along,
Yeah.
beyond North Ridge.
So I don't really remember I remember a thread of a lawsuit.
There was this big trend. There was a lot.
It was? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go
ahead.
The lawsuit that began to drive this was the lawsuit involving Home Place. So there was, and that is a lawsuit that MAPS brought against the development of the Roach Farm across the road. That lawsuit went from Midway City Council to Woodford Circuit Court, and that essentially split the community. In the middle of that,
That was the industrial park.
Yes.
yes,
You're right, that was
Which
bad.
is, yeah.
but as that was moving into different arenas to be bought out, the Bluegrass BGPI, Tom Pierce, Jack Kane, Malcolm Endicott, was the one, I think that's the three. Began negotiating to acquire these. And as the negotiations went, we brought in the Brandywine Conservancy to serve as a mediator, and they helped mediate a very comprehensive settlement agreement that had a whole lot of parties and ultimately settled the development of this property, and I think it led to the settlement of the property across the road. So that fight ended as part of settling this.
And I really think the fact that we were so split in Midway, we needed that 10-year break. Sometimes you have to do that, everybody calms down, and people move away, you just feel like it's working.
Go calm down.
Was it in the 90s then?
Yes. It started in 91.
That's a whole nother story.
That's-
The school board did not want to build this school here.
No, they didn't.
But we worked with all the school board members except the Judy Clark, I think was Marywood's representative, and she wasn't going to vote for us. But we worked with the other four, and I think we only needed 3 votes. We got 3
We
votes.
got 3 votes.
But, we donated the land to the school. Well, they did, the city, but I think we donated. We built the road, we put the sewer line into the school, so we did spend some money. But we realized we weren't going to have any young families if we didn't have the
And
school.
newer sides never did.
So, it all worked together.
Right, so I was involved in all this because I was at the planning office while I was there before and still am. But anyway, I brought a copy of the Brandywine plan that Hank alluded to that shows all the preserved land that's part of the easement and how they envision connecting Northridge that's next to Holly Hill up to now Northridge. It ended up being designed a little bit differently. But I also brought a copy. So this farm was called the Grugan Farm, and that was going to become Lee's Creek Glen that proposed 88 houses on this hillside. Yeah. So, you know, out of bad things come beautiful things. And we're sitting with beautiful things. So then when that happened, as Hank said, then they started with the Brandywine and they bought the Riper Farm, is what that was called. But anyway, I've just got some maps and things of those different concepts. But because I knew about the potential park, my son Charlie was looking for an Eagle Scout project. So he decided to do an Eagle Scout project, and he developed the first trails, and I'll let him talk about that in just a little bit.
Yeah, and so this was in spring of 2003, would have been 18, but Boy Scout Troop 40 out of Midway Christian Church at the time was run by Joe Lovell, and to be an Eagle Scout, one of the big primary things that you have to do is you have to do some sort of community-based project. The one that I ended up choosing was here at this park and down there in the trails back in that area. There were some trails in there. They were very overgrown at the time. So the objective of the project was basically go through and clean those trails up. We also installed steps at one point and did a bunch of mulching. That previous winter there had been a severe ice storm, and so they had taken a bunch of the down debris and shredded it and blown it back up into the quarry area, and so we hauled the mulch out of the quarry and mulched all the trail back in there. Planted several native species trees back in the area, put a lot of signage up for a lot of that. That was then shortly thereafter destroyed, vandalized, but that was what I did for the park at that time. And this book is part of that project is you have to document all that. So there's a lot of pictures in here and the process I went through for that project. I think I looked and it was over 220 man hours worth of work between the boys in the troop and then the adults that helped with the troop at that time that we put into the park.
What year would this have been?
2003, spring of 2003.
And the lawsuits that I had record of, the change for this park started in 1988.
1988?
And of course, this was in the county, the city hadn't annexed it, so the planning commission's recommendation went to the fiscal court. They approved it, and then it was appealed, the zone change decision, and the court overturned the decision and denied it.
So in reality, the park, the school, and even Midway Station were kind of all tied together.
They were. In Brandywine, the planning design team that Maps brought in helped tie all that together.
Fascinating.
I'm a very poor substitute, but this was planned when Joyce Evans thought she was going to be here, and she took a plane to deal with a family matter and tagged me to imitate Joel Evans, which I'm not capable of doing, except in some respects. But I do want to mention that Joel played a very active role, not only in the litigation, but also in the tree ordinances, implementing and defending and planting trees. And he did a lot of work in the park as Joel before there was a more organized structure. So somebody else may be able to document what he did better than I. I think some of you know that he celebrated the Midway Borough tree, and there were periods when you could get seedlings from him to replicate the borough.
Chica Pinhook,
Chica Pinhook.
out by the,
Yes, that's a Midway tree.
that's what he told me.
You told me what to see out those cards.
I thought it was a
Dana,
borough.
when did you work on that
It's
project?
definitely not a borough. I thought it was a town, but.
Okay.
Dana worked on the project
I said I
with
can't
Joel.
imitate Joel.
When you all worked on the creek.
In 2004, I was looking for a stream that needed to be restored for mitigation for a project I was working on for work. And I was able to get $300,000 from the developer that I was working for to do stream restoration down here on Lewis Branch. So we stabilized the banks for about a 1,200-foot length of the stream. At that time, in 2004, the creek was really undercutting Dudley Street down in the bend there, and on down on the other side of the dog park, the stream banks were in really poor shape. So we were able to get some big chunks of limestone, and we stabilized the area. We put tow rock around the bend down on Dudley Street. And we were able to really stabilize those banks and keep the road from being undercut worse than it had been.
Well, you know why it does that? It used to be straight.
Right, the creek used to go straight across Dudley Street, around where the dog park is, and, and it was straightened, I think, in the late 1800s. I mean, it was
With the distillery.
right. And they put some really bad bends, right angle bends in the creek, and creeks don't like that. So it was trying to find its way back to equilibrium, and I think we helped it by stabilizing. We weren't able, of course, to restore it back to its original channel. But also, I think it did help the park somewhat, our project, not only stabilizing the stream, but at that time, on the other side of the dog park, there were no trees there at all. There was a row of trees right along the top of the stream bank, but there were no trees, giving a riparian area that was shaded and, forested like creeks like to have next to them. So we were able to do that, and I think that has helped quite a bit with the stream. We also dug some deep pools in it, and we created some riffles to provide better aquatic habitat in there, and I enjoy looking at the creek just about every day and appreciating what it looks like now.
When was that work done?
We did that at the end of 2004.
Charlie referred to a major ice storm that we'd had here, and after that, it's when they came in and they hired a person with draft horses to come in, and all the damaged trees in there, rather than getting there with bulldozers and doing more damage to all the wetland in there, they got the draft horses and cut everything in there and drug that out, and then they chipped up the small stuff. And the last day of that, they had the kids from the school came down. They did a tug of war with the horse. They had a rope out to the horse, and then the whole class, or maybe the whole school, I don't know. And then the horse just walked away. Pulling all the kids down. A few of them had wrapped a rope around their hand. They were proud of their rope burns. And another project that Bob Rathbone did was that they borrowed equipment to shock the creek, electrical equipment, and then it would knock everything out, and then you could look at it, and then it comes back to and everything. But I forget how many, but it's a huge number of fish and other animals. I mean,
We had about 24 species
yeah,
of fish.
I mean, you just wouldn't think there would be in that small of a creek.
Who built these pavilions? I know Joel planted these trees.
These were built with a grant in the early 2000s.
The city built them.
Yeah, I believe so.
The Lions Club looked at it, but it was just more than we could handle. But they didn't look quite as attractive as they do right
Yeah,
now.
they didn't have the way
The rails are huge. It's quite dangerous.
You know, when was it built?
Early 2000s, I believe. Because I said that because we're talking about replacing the roofs, and we know it's almost 20 years old. And we have to report every so often about the condition of them because to appease the insurance on them and the grant.
Well, I was here on July 3rd, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, when Nora was born. So I was here then.
When was the railroad tracks through there? What was the demise of them? The railroad tracks that went through there, where's the train
The
tracks?
other direction, the Brand Street Railroad.
That was built in around 1884 from Georgetown to Midway to Salem.
Also went that way and not that way?
It was further down.
Northwest as opposed to east-west, or south-east?
Went on Brand Street.
Would be opposite of what-
Brand Street was.
And that bypass into Midway was part of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the bypass, as you go on the corner of Grove Street, Patty, doesn't that follow?
Yes,
It
yeah.
follows the train track exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In park, there's back in there, big track, and then all the way to the south.
Well, when did Green Space start working, and how did they work here?
Green Space was a part of Renaissance. That was, at MAPS was until 1999, and then we got into the Renaissance. And MAPS just took over, I mean, it was a park. It was,
And Dale Benson just worked down here
Dale Benson did a lot,
by himself.
yeah.
pretty much.
And we formed, what, the 5 committees, of course, and that was after we got the library. I mean, we did accomplish a lot. I mean, you ought to see this list of things that they were wanting to do back in the 80s. It's just amazing what's happened. I'm just so proud of Midway, it really is. And new people are coming in all the time to start new ideas.
Well, but sorry to say there
Joel was the first head of Green Space.
Green Space, yes, he was.
And he was the one who,
And Dale
we
Benson.
planted these trees
Right.
here.
I remember that.
Back then.
Dale Benson, Doug Farmer,
Yeah.
Rathbone.
Bob came in while Joel was still head of it, and then Bob Rathbone took over when Joel decided that he had enough. And Bob was responsible for tree planting too, and you know, interacting with the group that Gina was a part of, and just trying to, removing invasive species, trying to do, and gathering people together and getting them organized to do as much as he could, and then there were just different kinds of issues cropped up in the city, and a lot of the force for working in the park really went down quite a bit, and it's incredible how much damage that does when that happens. The invasive species just went right back. You know, there were places we had completely cleared out on those trails, and they completely grew back in a few years, and which is why when John came in, there was so much work to do, and why when we were on the advisory committee, we thought something needs to be permanent about taking care of this place.
We didn't have funds either.
Well, even if you don't have that, if you have people who are, it's their mission to be in charge, if you have a board that's, you know, it's in your city and it's supposed to be looking after things, then there's something to fall back on, and there's more impetus to get money from somewhere when you have something like that. So hopefully that will push the future more stable.
Does anybody know more, I know somebody has to, probably multiple people, more about some of the history before it became multi-brother park though? I mean, I know Lloyd, there's a home up here. I'm just curious.
There was a sign in the book over there that said that it's Lee's Branch.
Lee's Branch, it
Memorial
was called
Park.
that when it first.
Now, I don't know why it would be Memorial Park, that kind of thing.
They just decided. They just put it.
Well, yeah, the home place used to be in the middle of those trees.
Right.
There was a house that was there.
No kidding.
And that's the original road going up the hill.
Oh, that
To the
is?
home, yes. We're glad they kept
Is
that.
this the home we're talking about, or is this another home? Was there more than one home up here?
There was one here, and then the one that's on the college property. That one's still there?
That one's still there, yeah. Was this ever farmed, that you know?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Lucis Francisco farm too.
So I think it was part of Francisco.
It was big farm, yeah.
Yeah.
There was, when we kept cleaned out the woods, there was the ruins of an old tobacco center in there, just the frame and everything. Because we carried out every piece of trash you could. It was too big, and so I don't know if they cut it all up or finally got just a whole crew of people in there to carry it out, but it stayed. American pictures.
Lloyd says that it's his mother's grandfather, and he called him Grandpapa, who lived here, and his uncles all lived here. And he said they used to haul rock out of the quarry, but the quarry was already there. So there's industrial history there too, and I don't know much about it, except there obviously was a quarry, and maybe a paper mill. Is that what the paper mill was?
Okay, go there. Paper mill, and then the paper mill was over where the water tower is, in that block. It was there 3 or 4 years in the 1870s. That's why they rerouted the creek to make for a mill street.
A mill street.
The photographs that went around, you can see the amount of industrial buildings that were in there are huge. When my kids were little, they're in their 40s now, but we would walk back, you could go down to the corner grocery store and walk back up through there, and there were the concrete ruins of the old fermentation pans, I guess, or big long concrete pans and everything. And of course there was a stockyards that tell me right below the bank there, because you had 2 railroads crossing here, and there was a Y where you could get from one to the other, and some people brought cattle in and kept them there and fed them there until fed them in the distillery, spit distillery's grain until they could ship them off. I think that was one of the reasons there were some people opposed to the stockyards out across the interstate, because they remember the old stockyards eating distiller's grain downtown in Midway.
And that was the Richardson family, I think, had the stockyards, and there was Lewis Brewer's family.
Miss Bradley says she remembers the stockyard.
You remember the
When I
stockyard?
first came here.
And Brenda Jackson can tell you all about the distillery and everything. She's got a picture that you could, standing on Martin Street, I think they were right there, you can see the distillery in the background. And of course, that burned down with 47,000 barrels of bourbon in there.
Is that when they were burning their hands, dipping into the water?
That's the
Whiskey
state's,
water?
on some of the old maps, Martin Street was called a tin cup alley. And I always thought that was a derogatory economic term, but it said it was from people using their tin cups and dip whiskey and branch water out of the creek. So,
When I was in the 4th grade, the distillery caught on fire. We were down, the school was down the L school, and they let us all out because they thought the town was going to blow up. They really, so we all ran straight down to the distillery. It was very exciting.
with your tin cups.
But y'all.
Was that in the 50s? When did that burn?
That's
When did that burn?
in the 50s.
Well, it was
I was in the 4th grade, so
More than one.
57, something like that. Charlie, you said you already found trails in the animal trails? So
They were it could have just been from random people walking through that area, but they weren't defined, but I mean, they were there, but it wasn't like there were clearly areas where there had been foot traffic before. We just basically solidified it.
Kids played in there. You would find the paintballs and the paintball guns. Just these I'd never seen a paintball gun. So it's smaller than a ping pong ball, but it looks like a soft shelled egg if you've ever seen one. But they were about 3/4 inch diameter. Yeah. And they were laying around everywhere in there from where the kids would.
That was after Charlie did the trails.
No, before there was, yeah.
Because I know that was from that caused some of the vandalism.
Yeah.
And this was a cattle farm, so the cattle create trails.
Yeah, that's what I just asked them, if they could have been animal trails.
Yeah, and they're really well defined, and they, you know, they always walk on their trails over and over again, so the trails could have been from when it was a farm.
Wouldn't that be great if the trails we had, at least some of them were started by cows? So then, going back to, so, as John and the board can tell you, there's a lot of glass in certain parts of it, so it became a dump at some point. Was that during the distillery period, you think? Hard to say.
We've got it behind our store, glass, I think they just threw their bottles out.
We got glass in our yard.
Yeah, every time it rained, because it was a bar, so they just threw them in the backyard. They didn't have garbage pickup.
I think it's interesting in Midway, pretty much anywhere you dig a hole, and it seems to have a hole. That if it's anywhere where there are any houses at all, you go down about this far and you get this coal layer, and there's this layer of maybe this thick coal dust, which I guess was from people. There's one place in particular in the park. It's kind of like at the Warfield end, if you go all the way this direction on that, where there's a giant pit full of broken glass, which is like the most broken glass anywhere ever. Because it's like, I don't know how deep it is, but we dug it down several feet trying to get rid of it all. And it's right, it was on the map, it's right next to where something, it's called the bottling shed. So I was taking the things that broke, or things they didn't really have, they just threw them into this hole. And yeah, I don't think you'll ever find any of that. But then there's a lot of trash from other sources, like what's at the Gratz entrance. That was definitely just a trash dump. And one bottle, we found a Coke bottle still intact from 1950. So I know it was a dump at least then. And there's just a lot of just random trash. And when we cleaned up the winter creeper, it was tall enough that it covered up an entire bicycle that you couldn't see. And an iron bed and a chair that you couldn't see that would. So.
We did haul a bunch of garbage out. Like we ended up with we had a dumpster, there was a dumpster. Yeah.
And that kind of, that dumping thing, it continues because Monday, somebody went down here and threw out a recliner from their house. Down there. And you know, over at Midway Station, somebody threw out that hot tub. So it's just like, I don't know why people think that that's acceptable, but it's wrong.
It was, we had a farm on Morse Mill, that was on Morse Mill Road, and at one point, there's a steep hill, and it was very common for people to come and dump washing machines, old cars, because it was really overgrown, and it was too steep to farm, and that was the custom, and you had to really kind of police those kinds of areas where if somebody thought you couldn't see it, then...
But there's so many great ways of getting rid of stuff now.
Now, yeah, but back then it was...
Also here in town with the college burning coal, with the churches burning coal, there are a huge amount of cinders. And so almost all your old sidewalks, the concrete's not very thick. And then there wasn't crushed stone, there were just cinders, coal cinders out of there.
Did Midway ever have brick streets?
I don't know.
They had a used flower house, they were repaving it, and they had scraped it down, and underneath it was brick. So one day.
They used to be lined bricks out from the outside. I mean, the streets are wider than they are.
Over by the Methodist church, which was the original elementary school, they've uncovered a whole sidewalk of brick going down the Sarah and Lee's.
Yeah, there's a whole brick sidewalk there. And where across the corner there of our house and their house, and Bill found it in the minutes of the city, but there's some large stone about this wide and about that deep and maybe 3 or 4 foot long.
Those are curbs.
And they put them, and there were two of them in a row, and they come out on Sarah and Lee's side too. And so they were across the street there, so the kids going down through there, because it was mud and gravel street and everything, it kept them up enough where when they crossed the street, they didn't have to get into the mud. That's what.
There are a lot of, you know what I'm saying, though, a lot of places have those.
These are,
rock
I
curbs.
see the limestone curbs all around where they're about this wide and everything. These are maybe a foot wide and about 8 inches thick. They go right out, and then they either paved over or they go into the blacktop there, so I don't know exactly if they moved the ones out in there.
We
John,
have
I'm
the
sorry.
original railroad, the limestone railroad.
Well, the original ties up there by the caboose, those, instead of cross ties, they were 2 rows of ties, the holes over 17 inches, and they had flat rails. They weren't, there wasn't the flange of the wheel just hung over the inside, and they would let those in, but as the trains went across, they would wear off, and those flat rails are about this wide, and they would come up, and they'd shoot through the floor of the cars. They call them snakeheads, because, as you know, metal is, if it's been in a coal or something, it has a tendency to go back to a coal like that. But when they see, this is only the second railroad in the country, and they really didn't have a vision of what, there weren't cross ties and everything. They thought that, and they had plenty of stone, and that was all slave labor, and they had plenty of labor. And but they did that. But they would heave and whatever with the frost. So it was
And some of the original rails were out of wood, and the trains would sometimes be pulled by horses.
yeah, the original was.
Yeah.
When they built the Good Shepherd Church down there, they cut through the old rail bed. And we all went down there and looked at it, and there was several layers of composite of looked like cinder and whatever, and then where that was actually the horse track in the middle between the 2 rails.
Probably if you dug under that railroad track, you would find layers of its history, because it's all just been built up, which is fascinating.
John, you, and I think Bill did some research, but tell us a little bit more about the supposed cemetery that you found out there?
No.
That's makeshift burial plot? That's a fascinating
Well,
story.
there are all these different things that converge, but for me, you gave me a Xerox copy of a map drawn with ballpoint pen on like liquid paper, and it was that, what was that guy's name? Do you remember his name? Bill? Anyway, he said he, in 1947, in 1947, something like that, that he, as a child, had seen that there was a graveyard down inside the park. And on this map, he drew the map of Parish Hall and then this house on the hill. And at that time, those trees were not there. All the trees were cut down. So, and he said that it was in between those 2 things exactly. And we'd already found this place where there was a rock wall that made a corner. And it's weird for a rock wall to make a corner other than us holding something in. So we thought, well, maybe that's where it is. And anyway, that's what we were thinking was the cemetery. So we cleaned it out and planted some of that dwarf fescue that doesn't get very big, so you don't have to mow it. And we were so proud of it. And then we located some people who were archaeologists, I forget.
Yeah.
Did you put us on the list? So they came by and said, no way. But I kind of was iffy on it anyway, because there's only about this much topsoil there, and it's constantly flooding, and I thought, you'd have to be pretty desperate to bury somebody you liked.
There's no idea what that rock wall was there for then, really, is there?
Nobody really knows. Phil Giroux told me he thought it would just be for animals. I think somebody did have a garden, or that was something that they had there.
That's interesting.
That other stone wall is a whole other thing, because that's from the dam.
Right.
You go down in Gary County, and there's the old road between Danville and Lancaster. You go down through there, and there's lots of whole fields. They're all, each one's squared, and they've got rocks on all four sides of them. It looks just like Ireland.
But this is
Probably,
like
yeah.
on the side of a hill. This is the most improbable
Yeah,
place to put
yeah.
something.
Maybe that makes sense. Bill, what were you gonna say?
That map came from Margaret Ware Papers. And she donated them to the Woodford County Historical Society, but I went through all of them first in case stuff we didn't.
In case there was gold?
Maybe it was a cat
Anyway,
cemetery.
this letter, right there, he was pointing out on this map all the cemeteries around Midway. And he must have had some reason to believe there was one there.
At the time, there were these, when I first saw it, there were some kind of flat rocks that were stuck in there. And I think maybe he, as a child, thought that was a cemetery. And that was their story as kids, that was a cemetery. But obviously, never. I mean, that was going to be something we had to deal with.
Right.
The cemetery.
Right.
And just pretend it's
No,
not.
I know that. It was something we're actually kind of worried about. Yeah.
So it's actually kind of good news.
It really was. It really was. The story still fascinates me, especially just because we have no idea what that wall was really built for.
So and we call that a cemetery trail. But then that day, I was like, well, I don't know where that's. So I pulled the sign out, and we made one that said Osage Orange Trail, because there's that, back behind it, there's that 75-foot tall Osage orange tree that fell over, probably, I don't even know, maybe 100 years ago, because they just don't, they don't rot. It's just been a really long time.
When we were talking about the maps group, I was thinking about when I was first on city council, and I was still able to walk then, and I went down to Lee's Branch, and I saw the honeysuckle. And my neighbor is Zeb Weeks, and he's with Conservation Kentucky at the time he was. And so I approached him to talk to him about if the state could help us somehow to get rid of the honeysuckle. And he was really excited. It would have been the smallest project that the state had ever picked up, and they would have provided like a popper for the honeysuckle. And I was really excited about it, and I brought it to city council, and one of the council people said, no, if we let the state get their hands on it, they'll have all kinds of regulations and rules, and we won't be able to do what we want. And it was voted down. And at the time, I was like, oh, the park will never get started again. And I was distraught. And now I realize that something much better came out of it, which, when you're at those forks in the road, you never know. That's something even better is ahead. And thank goodness, because we couldn't have built the bridges across the creek and done a lot of the cool things that John's done if we'd gone that route, so.
Well, I reached out to Tom Bozar to see if he could come tonight, and in his defense, I only gave him a day's notice, so he was not available. But he wrote up kind of something he wanted to say and sent it to me, so I'll read it.
Just a little information on Walter Bradley Park. When I was on council, I served one term with Walter Bradley. Then he retired. Not long after that, Walter passed away, and I suggested we rename the park in his name. It was passed unanimously and supported by Becky Moore, who was mayor at the time. We all agreed that this would be a wonderful way to honor Walter. Dale Benson and Doug Farmer were the first people who started going to the park and removing honeysuckle and creating trails that are there today. Joel Evans brought a team of loggers who removed old trees from the park with horses. This was paid for by a grant and used as an outdoor educational classroom for students at Northside. During my first term as mayor, we were faced with a real problem concerning the bridge going to the park. It was unsafe due to the age and the creek undermining its foundation. So would that be this notch down here? With the help of then Versailles Mayor Fred Siegelman, we were able to receive emergency road funding from Governor Ernie Fletcher to replace the bridge with a newer bridge that is there today. This was a godsend for the citizens of Midway because we did not have the money to replace the bridge, and it was a $200,000 plus project. Around the same time, we received a stream restoration grant from a Lowe's store that was opening in Richmond. The state required them to restore a street in Kentucky as part of their agreement. Gina Morris was instrumental in acquiring this funding and overseeing the project. What they did improved the flow and water quality to Lee's Branch. In the past, when we had a lot of rain in the creek, bridge and road would always flood. Since the improvements, those problems ceased. A big thank you needs to be given to Gina for all her efforts. The dog park was a Boy Scout Eagle project that really brought a lot of use to the park. At the time, I believe we had the only dog park in Woodford County. This was built with all volunteer labor and very little city funding. The council agreed to clean out the quarry and get it to where it could be used as future gathering area and amphitheater. This area had a lot of promise, but it had been neglected over the years and been a dumping ground for old city projects. All the material was hauled out and reseeded to where it can be used today. A lot of giving citizens of Midway have been involved in improving Walter Bradley Park for the better. It has been a real community effort.
One of my favorite memories from when Tom was mayor was the year that they sowed seed over here on this hill. You all remember that? And it turned out to be turnip seed. The whole hill was turnips. It was so ate turnips all winter. It was wonderful.
The only time I saw deer down to that park too is that.
Well, Gina, I didn't know they were deep holes, but my grandsons were here this weekend, and after one was left, and he begged me to go to the park because he wanted to show me their secret place where the fish were jumping. And he took me down there, which just not so far down here, and there were fish jumping. I had never seen a fish jump in that creek, and I'd been there 20 years, and I was just thrilled. And it was right there where you cross over, where there's almost a waterfall in the deep bend.
It improved the habitat, digging some deeper pools in the stem and getting some riffles in places to keep it aerated, and it was a good restoration.
Yeah, my daughter said he took her there too, and she saw him jumping, and the last thing he saw, he came upon the heron, and he was just thrilled.
Wow.
Is that when they dredged the creek?
Well, we didn't actually dredge it, we just did some channel work in it. Dredging is really not a good thing to do for a creek.
Almost all of the creek in the park has a rock bottom, so that's bedrock.
Obviously, Lee's Branch dumps into the Elkhorn, but it starts on a farm, doesn't it? Woodford County?
There's two different springs.
So two different springs kind of converge?
One is off of, if you're going over to...
In front of the college. There's a tributary.
Yeah, that's the other one. The one I'm talking about is if you were going to Versailles, off on the right-hand side, there's that old stone building with the tarp on the top. It comes out of the side of the That's one of them.
And one
The other
branch
one is...
crosses by Water Station.
That's probably the bigger one.
Yeah, the watershed starts near Big Snake. There's a break right there.
Okay.
Where the water comes. It's huge. It's a huge watershed.
I always thought that's one of the great advantages for Walter Bradley Park is that it also has a water feature.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, everyone wants a water feature.
Yeah.
This is like, people spend millions of dollars to put one in.
Right.
This one goes the entire length of the park.
It's legit.
You think about what Lexington's doing, they're spending millions of dollars to dig theirs back up. They paved over it.
Well, and it's a floodplain. And it's a great preservation tool for managing a public floodplain.
Makes sense.
Bill? I'd like to mention how Lee's Branch got its name. It was named for Willis Lee, who was a deputy surveyor with Fincastle County when the first surveyors came in to survey in 1773 and 1774.
This was still Virginia back then.
And Willis Lee, he was, and then he helped start Leestown in Frankfurt. And that was named for him. And the Leestown Pike is therefore named for Willis Lee.
They told us that Buffalo Trace, that Leestown Road, was originally a buffalo trace. That was how it was originally formed.
I know
I don't know if they were just doing that
There were buffalo in this area.
to, bolster their story, but that's what they told us.
Yeah, they probably. Well, they do say that Leestown was down there by the distillery originally, and that the road was originally a Buffalo Trace.
We took the Buffalo Trace distillery tour down there, and they, when they were surveying it here, they camped there at the trace, and then that night, a herd of buffalo came running through there on their way to the river, and then right through the middle of their camp and everything, so I guess they're lucky to have finished their survey. I've got to run out.
I think you're about to have a storm.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming.